Okay, now that we have a understanding of how to make a level, make a new folder structure, let's talk about the typical ways to use the level editor. Let's start with some basics. So to disconnect the camera, Shift C, we talked about that before. To move around, arrow keys, or WASD if you're on keyboard. Actually, I think it is just WASD. To go fast, you press Shift. It's like a boost. And then to pan, you right-click and drag the mouse around to pan. It's very similar to a lot of other model editing softwares like Blender. Middle click, I don't think it does anything. Left click allows you to drag over objects, and you get a selection window. And then I'm sure a lot of you are familiar with this, so if you would be getting into level modeling if you weren't level creating. But this is the gizmo that allows you to manipulate objects in a scene. So blue is Z axis, it goes up and down. X is red and Y is green, and it allows you to move them. You can highlight the box to move on that plane. So this would be Z and Y. This would be Z and X, left and right, and then this would be X and Y. Useful, for sure. Definitely get used to using that. Right now I have the game paused. You can unpause and pause by pressing J by default. Go ahead and unpause it. And then the items that you're going to see in the map are visible depending on what they are. This is a spawn location. You can move this around, and if you save it, next time you load in the map, this is the default spawn, you'll spawn in the air. So this one we keep close to the ground. Let's see what else. Notice that when I click off the screen, it's selecting the terrain. So the terrain block is this massive chunk of land. If you don't want it to be selected all the time, or if you accidentally select it, because if you delete the terrain block, there's nothing to drive on, you can change the attributes in the inspector. Okay, so let's talk about that. So we know how to navigate. We know how to move around. Let's talk about the big four. That's what I call them. So the big four are the asset browser, the inspector, the material editor, and the scene tree. I'm going to dig into the inspector and the scene tree first. I know they're kind of out of order. Scene tree I usually have on my left side of the screen. It's exactly what it sounds like. It's a tree of all of the items in the scene. So when I talk about the terrain, when I selected it, you can see that little mountain. That's the item in the scene. The player is me, obviously. And I can make those not visible. I can hide them. I can unhide them. I can also lock them. If I don't want to accidentally delete it, I can lock the terrain. And no matter how many times I press delete, it says some locked objects were not deleted. So that's a good thing. If you don't want to accidentally delete your terrain, you can lock it. In these folders, you can see that by default, the template map has a couple organized folders. These are all customizable, just like your folder structure on your computer is. So you can change this: time of day, level info, sun, sky, clouds, all game elements to make a more realistic experience. Camera bookmarks. I haven't done much with camera bookmarks, but I think this is a way of setting up some places for the camera to spawn for levels and races and that kind of thing. Vegetation is what we just put down. It's an item called the forest. And so forest items are kind of a complicated topic. They're different from static objects. They are, from what I understand, less memory intensive, so they operate better. But you've got your grass, your forest wind emitter. All these are pretty self-explanatory items. Grass is actually your sprites that you see. I believe they call it ground cover. So these little sprites that you see, that is what grass is. And then water is the ocean plane over here. So you can see if I select that, it doesn't have an icon for it. Oh, it does, okay. The center of the water looks like right in the middle of the level, which is cool. I can raise that up. Floods, so you see all those flood mods. That's basically what's happening, is they're just raising this water plane. I can undo that by pressing Control-Z, just like a normal program. Player drop points, that is where you find your spawns. And then we don't have any waypoints, I don't believe, but waypoints are where you set up traffic and roads. You can specify certain areas. If you're doing a race, you can say, this is a waypoint, and here's a group of waypoints to make a course. If you've ever played in Utah, you'll see the waypoints that are used to create like crawling trails, that kind of thing. And then I'm not actually sure what AI decal waypoints group is. I don't actually use it. There's nothing in it right now. So the more that you mod, the more that you'll understand that developers are kind of moving fast and loose, and the organization of the scene tree or the way that they build their structure, it may not be as clean as it could be. It's all about priorities. What's more important, getting a new update released or organizing a scene tree when it doesn't really matter. Nobody's going to see this. So that is the scene tree, right? It's important to keep open. I usually keep that tab open pretty much the whole time. Let's talk about the inspector next. So the inspector goes on the right-hand side of the screen, in my opinion. That's where I like it. So when you select an object like the terrain, you'll notice that over here you get a bunch of details and characteristics. You've got the general block, you've got the transform block, let's call it, media, miscellaneous, editing, all these different fields that are inspecting or attributes of the thing that you've selected. So we've selected the terrain, we're looking at the terrain, and you can see here, I can change the name, I can change this position, I can even change the rotation. It's referencing which file in the folder is the terrain, which is the terrain.ter. If we have a mini map, I can load that in here. If we have a material texture set, which we could talk about later, I can load that here. Cast shadows, there's a lot of features here. Definitely recommend reading up on the documentation about all of these different fields. Max height, right? If this is a height map, what is the max height of that height map? I'll talk about height maps in a little bit. Base texture size, light map size, screen error. So the ones that are kind of concerning to you is base texture size. That's important. So if you want a 4K map, this would be 4096. And you can see things just got a little bit bigger. So in that instance, what's happening is it's multiplying the texture by that size. And you can see how there's little chunks now. So essentially, the bigger the base texture size, we'll go into more detail here, the more detail you can paint on the terrain. If it's smaller, it's more blocky. Think about little pixels. So it's per meter, what texture size per meter, essentially. Okay, I've talked enough about the terrain. If I look at the player, the inspector shows all of the elements that the player has too. And that includes, where's my player? That includes the color, right? I can change the color just like you would in the config. And I can change the render distance, a lot of stuff. Let me go back to the terrain because I always do this. I always accidentally select the terrain. One of the boxes here is selection enabled. I like to turn that off. If I still need to access the terrain, I can do it through the scene tree right here. But that way, when I'm clicking around in the map, like I'm doing right now, it's not going to accidentally pick the terrain up. Terrain pretty much stays where it needs to be, right? Okay. All right, so that's the inspector. Next, we have the asset browser. Let's talk about that. This one I like to expand. So by default, you're going to see our map, art, and assets. Those are the three folders. As soon as you start the game, vanilla, after you've installed it, you're going to see here. As the name suggests, if you want to add assets from a different folder, a different map, you can do that through this browser. You don't actually have to have the folder or the files in your RMap folder, right? If we look at our map and look at the shapes here, there's not much here. There's a bush. That's it. There's a bush and a tree. Looks like that's it. So that's the only thing that we actually physically have in our map are these three items. But because the developer has a bunch of assets to pull from in their maps, we can reference those. We can either reference them through the art folder. So I'll show you a couple here. We got some basic shapes. If we wanted to have a box, we could do that. A cylinder, all kinds of good stuff. If we wanted to spawn in some garage elements, we could drag that over. Shortcuts as well for manipulating the gyro is 1 for moving, up, down, left, and right, 2 for rotation, and then 3 for scale. I wanted to make it bigger. Okay. So the nice thing about this is it actually keeps your file size really low. This is something that's hotly debated and talked about. A lot of mods, levels that I've seen have just massive zip file sizes because the developer of the map is just copying everything into their folder as opposed to referencing it from a developer map. A previous issue, when you're referencing something that's a developer made, let's go to East Coast USA, for example. Let's go to shapes. Let's go to buildings. I don't have any of those textures yet. Let's go back to art. Shapes, common. Let's do objects. Yeah, cool. So let's say we want to build a bus stop in here. Right, got a nice little bus stop. We are referencing this DAE file that's in the object shapes art folder in the developer's folder. If the developer decides to move that DAE file, then the link would be broken. However, recently in I think the newest update, they've instituted what's called link files. Essentially, these are breadcrumb trails that allow us to reference developer assets and developer materials, and the link takes care of all the heavy lifting. So we don't have to update our map. If we point it to this particular asset, which I can actually see on the inspector where it's located at, I can go into shape name, and I can see, okay, art, shapes, objects, bus stop, jri.dae, right? If they decide to move this, the link file that they're supposed to put in this root folder is going to properly redirect me to the new location. Sounds kind of complicated. All you need to know is that it future-proofs the locations of your assets. If you want to use developer assets, you can use them. You don't have to worry about them all of a sudden breaking the link, and then all of a sudden they show that giant pink, no material, no object. Okay. The last thing I want to show for this video is the material editor. So material editor is extremely important. It is a collection of all of the materials. I'm going to shrink these all down here just to start. It's all the materials that are in this map. And by this map, I mean the map that we made. So the materials are referenced using a file called a main.materials.json file. I'm going to show you that real quick. Let's go to our level, our map, art, and as you can see, click off of it, main.materials.json file. Sometimes the developers will put main.materials.json files in the individual folders. So there might be one for the trees here, which is fine. There's one for the ground cover. You can do that. You can absolutely make them folder specific. I like to have it in one massive file. So this is actually one that I copied over that includes most of the materials that the developers have created. So that way the game can reference a lot of the materials without having to worry about missing materials. So the way this looks, I'm going to open this up. Looks like this. So you've got your name of the material, right? And then all the attributes of the material. So your base color map, normal map, opacity. Definitely read into materials and see how they work, because there was an older version. They've updated it recently to be a PBR material, which is much more physically based. rendering and much more accurate to real life. So definitely read up on that. Material Editor is one critical piece for making assets and moving them into BeamNG. So you have to understand the Material Editor. Okay, I think I've gone long enough for this video. We're about 15 minutes, so I will stop there for this one.